Nearly 2 years ago, a far-right movement that had been elected into government in 2030 attempted a coup, aiming to possibly destroy Gaul. Tonight, the GBC brings you an exclusive interview with former Prime Minister Kazum Morgan, the far-right extremist, and some might say neo-Nazi, who orchestrated the plot. We would like to caution our viewers that some of the disturbing remarks they are about to hear require viewer discretion. So, my first question is, what was the motive behind the attack on the server, and more broadly, the group as a whole? Specifically, what is your personal perspective on it?
Alright, so we both knew what was about to happen. I knew that I was about to get impeached. There was no doubt about it in my mind. I knew it was happening. I read the writing on the wall. So me and Abdullah, we both strongly decided that instead of being impeached and going out on the people who we felt had betrayed us as terms, we decided that we would cause some destruction, leave a bit of a memory of our existence forever. I felt that if my administration had just solely gotten impeached, we would be forgotten in history. But if I did what I did, then I would be remembered for a much longer time. People would talk about me thousands of years into the future, like talk about Julius Caesar today. And so it was more really just about putting my name in the history books instead of just being a footnote, being in a terms list. And so we all decided on May that we would, instead of going down like that with what we felt would be disgraceful, we would cause destruction, get a little bit of retribution. The media would tell you that we planned to overthrow the government. We all knew that absolutely was not going to happen. It was just unrealistic. That was not our goal. Our goal was to cause as much destruction and confusion as possible before we left. And I would say that we did exactly that. Overthrowing the government, that's just crazy. I knew that I had no chance of that. The government was far too large and far too centralized for me to ever even think about doing that. In addition to all this, I felt that the admin was treating me quite unfairly. Um, I got a notice over, I can't even remember, for God's sakes. I knew that, like, oh my God, it was over something that I felt was stupid. And so Galc Media will also tell you that it was over the notice solely. It wasn't. That's complete fake news. It was just a notice that like made me so angry because I was already getting a bunch of notices being like, "Oh, you better stop doing this before I ban you." And so I just thought I would be like, "All right, this I ain't doing this anymore. I'll be damned. I'm completely destroying, and I'm gonna level this server to the ground." And so yeah, that was what I did. And I would say I was quite successful in doing so because the server currently that I destroyed doesn't exist. It had about 10,000 pings by the time we were done. But now I'm here and I'm enjoying my life. And I'm completely content with what I did. And I'm glad that my name will forever be in the history books as the man who completely caused utter confusion and destruction in the first Gallic server.
In your final note, which you jointly published with your predecessor, Sharjah, shortly after the first string of attacks on the day of the attack, you said, quote, "From 2018 to 2020, this period in Gaul was fairly tame, especially compared to what Gaul is now in 2023. You later followed this up with, though fraught with errors, this time in Gaul was definitely way better than it is currently. There was no LGBT-ness, no actually sentiment from Nico. None of that. None of the stuff you see today. This is why I enjoyed it for so long, for this exact reason. Would you care to comment on how exactly Gaul became infested with LGBT-ness? And could you also explain why you and Sharjah personally viewed this specific topic as a greater issue compared to national concerns such as political corruption, specifically the corruption in your own party at the time of both you and your predecessor's terms?
Actually, that was Abdullah who wrote that part. That part wasn't by me. I think I was the very first statement that came out. I think that part was written by me. I know for a fact that part was written by Abdullah, and though I didn't write it, I can still try and justify it. From my standpoint, I joined Gaul in like what was it, 2030 or something like that. It was quite a bit ago. I emigrated to Gaul from the United States after the war, and it was fairly tame. There was no divide in sexuality, no political divide like we saw when I did my thing. It was a lot more relaxed, a lot more tame. But it became apparent that we were quite outnumbered, as we felt like we were the only straight people in Gaul at the time in the government, and that made us feel a bit isolated. We felt we were kind of being singled out, especially during Pride Month. We were kind of being singled out, and Joe, Abdullah, and we didn't like that. And so what we decided to do is we decided that we would not cooperate. We wouldn't tolerate any of that stuff. And in our government, we would try to make things what we felt to be a bit more even for heterosexual people. And we would try to remove all of this homosexual influence that we felt at the time was plaguing the country. And when it became painfully obvious to us that no, that wasn't going to happen, homosexuality, that was just the dominant thing. Everybody was homosexual, everybody except for us. And so, yeah, it wasn't what we thought it was. We joined a Gaul that was a lot more tame than it is when we nuked it, when we, destroyed its communication channels, and we felt like we were leaving it completely plagued by LGBTness. And so, what we could kind of take away from this is that we joined kind of more moderate than we were. But when all of this stuff started happening, like COVID, George Floyd, we became increasingly radicalized. Still am to this day. I still ain't changed many of my views, but we became increasingly hostile to these minority groups, and clearly Gaul was a part of that, and we just didn't tolerate it. And eventually we got to a point where we decided that it would be in our best interest to completely just do as much damage as we can. Actually, if you remember, there was an attack on the wiki site a couple of years ago. This was a couple of years ago before the nuke happened, and I was actually the one responsible for that. I originally did get accused of it, but I managed to talk myself out of it. But that wiki attack, that was by me and another compatriot.
During your time in Gaul, you were frequently moderated by staff for actions such as promoting far-right race theories, using slurs, primarily racial ones, and routinely harassing others. In response, you often retaliated against those who moderated you, accusing them of being too controlling. My question is, what exactly do you believe the moderation team did wrong, when, in reality, they were simply enforcing the rules that are considered to be quite the standard in many communities?
I'll be damned. First of all, that question that you just asked me, you presented it in a very one-sided manner, and I don't appreciate that.
Mr. Morgan, I'm just simply reading the questions that I've been instructed to
I
ask
did
you.
not see it as being simply enforcing the rules, and that's because some of the rules that applied to me didn't apply to others. And so I raised hell about that because I thought that was a problem. I thought that was targeted against me and disrespectful. See, my views at the time, and still are to this day, actually even more so, are incompatible with Gaul. It's just, they've always have been, they are now. It's just a fact of life. And so, I simply did not view this as the moderators abiding by the rules. I thought that how I felt, my beliefs were being suppressed in favor of a system that was constantly against me and the things that I believed. And Abdullah happened to agree with me, which is why we teamed up. We became close political allies because we shared many of these views that Gallic society looked down upon us so much for. And so you say it like they're simply just enforcing the rules. I don't see it like that. Because there was just one time when I called deviant a word that I can't say right now, but we all know which word this is. And then deviant called me that word back, and he got away with it. I raised hell about that matter. Eventually, I did get a concession, but it's just the fact that it happened. Another big thing was during my political campaign for Prime Minister, I made a fitness server where I could campaign and introduce propaganda. And Cade, who was like the top moderator, still is. He came in telling me I have to abide by all these guidelines, and like this guy's mini modding me in my own server. I'll be damned, and I wasn't tolerating that, so I shut it down. I had his ass kicked, and that was a whole nother thing. I felt like this was my server. I own this. Why is this telling me what I can and can't do? And so it's a bit more than just, oh, they're abiding by the rules. That's just, my viewpoints have always been just incompatible with Gallic society. And I felt like I was being mistreated because of it. That's just the truth. That's my truth.
2 years have passed since your attack on the country, and in its current state, we'll see your thoughts on the events that unfolded in Gaul after your arrest in the long term.
I did have some channels that let me keep tabs on what happened after I got incarcerated. But those tabs and those channels of communication, they're long deceased now. And I'm quite disinvolved with the current state of affairs that's going on. And I don't really care to understand or even know about them. One thing I do know that happened is that after my my attack, there were some number of figures who were purged, namely Jabber, for allegedly having an involvement or downright supporting me in this. And I have to tell you right now, that is just not true. Jabber, he was indeed sympathetic to me, but that boy had no knowledge and had no involvement in this attack.
While it
I am
is
also
true that
aware
he was
that
not
the
directly
country of
involved,
South
the
Africa
GIS has
is
gathered
so
evidence
because
indicating
the
that
same
he,
damn thing
along
that
with
you
many
did.
others,
The country
was
of South
aware of the
Africa
plot
wasn't
in
aiding
advance and
by
openly
this.
supported the attack
And
without
meanwhile,
offering any
we
warning
tried
to
so
state
hard to
officials.
avoid this war. We saw it as pointless. Nobody needed to die for a royal family member. We just we wanted peace in the whole region, and I felt like that was being ignored, and that Gaul was destabilizing the region. There's also been allegations that the Central African government supported me in my attack, and that's also just not true. The attack was completely coordinated by me, Leo, and Abdullah. No other party was involved in that. It was just the three of us. We had so much power. We had so much access to these channels that allowed us to create so much destruction. It looked like a multi-man insurgency, and it wasn't that. It was just an attack. It was just a way to go out on our own terms. And that's all it really was. We knew that we would be captured, and we were okay with that. We were just trying to create as much chaos, as much destruction, and confusion as we possibly could before I was impeached, which was inevitable because it was going to happen. I said it earlier. And so the current state of affairs of Gaul, I have no knowledge on as of right now. I don't care. I mean, it's probably not something I want to hear about anyway. It's probably, in terms of how I view things, changed for the worst. But, what can I do about it? I don't care. The people in here are just absolutely fantastic. So, yeah. Although I am aware that a minor purge did take place after it to find individuals who might have been responsible. And I have to tell you that simply nobody else was involved. It was simply the three of us.
Morgan was recently relocated to the fourth corrective labour colony, where he is expected to serve the remainder of his prison sentence. His predecessor, Sharjah, however, has been transferred to a mental hospital, where he is allegedly being treated for a wide range of issues, with the possibility of being granted amnesty by Georgian Palace in the near future.